What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over Acts of Vengeance. Now, Acts of Vengeance was this massive crossover that came out in the late 1980s, early 1990s. Now, when it came to Acts of Vengeance, the main purpose of the entire event was to see our heroes fight against other characters they don't usually fight against. So for example, you had Spider-Man fighting against Graviton. You had the Hulk fighting against Grey Gargoyle. You had Wolverine fighting against Tiger Shark, characters they don't usually fight against. Now, the whole idea of Acts of Vengeance came from Loki, who at first played a guy who was very mysterious and kept telling other villains, the reason why you keep losing to heroes is because you keep going after the same heroes. Why not try to go after different heroes that you don't usually fight against? Because most likely you'll then be able to win against those heroes. Unfortunately, they don't win, they still lose. But it was a way to see different kinds of villains come together, like Magneto, Doctor Doom, Red Skull, and even the Kingpin as well. Now, today's video, we're going to jump back over to Iron Man comics. Now, just like the other Acts of Vengeance books, you do have Iron Man going up against other characters that he doesn't usually fight against when it comes to him being a hero. So for example, in the first chapter, he is going to fight against the Wrecker. And then the second chapter, he is going to fight against a character known as Chemistro, the second one. But first, let's dive into the first chapter when it comes to Iron Man fighting against the Wrecker. Now, the opening pages of this book, we do pick up with Iron Man just being your regular superhero, because you do have Iron Man just flying by, but he overhears that parts of a bridge is beginning to collapse, and you have people who are trapped inside a car about to fall off the bridge. And so you have Iron Man being able to save those people, but to also fix the bridge as well to make sure that nothing else happens to other people who may try to use the bridge. Now, after doing that, you then have Iron Man wonder where is his ride, and of course he is talking about Rhodey. And so we do see Tony and Rhodey heading over to a new research center that Tony has been working on, better known as Stark Prosthetics, an entire center that's being used as a way to help create different kinds of devices to help out people who may not have the ability to use certain limbs. Now, this entire center is being run by a character known as Curtis Carr. Now, when it comes to Curtis, he used to be a super villain. Matter of fact, his name was Chemistro. And while being Chemistro, he had a powerful weapon known as the alchemy gun. Now, when it came to the alchemy gun, it had the ability to transmute certain matters into a different kind of matter. So for example, if he had a piece of gold and he used his alchemy gun on that piece of gold, he could turn it into a piece of glass or a puddle of water. Now, when it came to Curtis being a super villain, he had on accident shot his own foot, turning his foot into steel. Now, here's the thing. Any object that was hit with the alchemy gun, after a short period of time, that object would turn into, well, dust. And so when it came to his foot being turned to steel, after a while, it turned to dust. And so he was crippled. Now, he was able to create a robotic foot for himself that would allow him to walk again. But he also turned into a good guy as well. And so for Tony, he felt like this center would be perfect for Curtis to actually be in charge of, to help out other people who may have lost a certain limb. On the outside of the center, we actually pick up with a character known as the Wrecker. Now, when it comes to the Wrecker, he's usually part of the Wrecking Crew, a group of characters that usually fight against Thor. But because this is acts of vengeance, we have to see Iron Man fighting against a character that he does not usually fight against. Now, when it comes to the Wrecker, he was actually hired by the Kingpin to go after Iron Man. And if he's able to kill off Iron Man, he'll then be able to make a lot of money. Now, what he wants to do with that money is to hopefully hire one of his old team members back to the team, Thunderball. And then once that team member is back on his side, they will then go out of their way to free the others from the vault, the super prison. Now, around this time in Marvel Comics, the world did not know that Iron Man was Tony Stark. And so for the Wrecker, his main goal is not Iron Man. His main goal is to kill off Tony Stark to get that money. Now, when it comes to the Wrecker, he does have the ability of superhuman strength, but only when he's holding onto, well, his crowbar. You see, after a series of events, his crowbar became enchanted. And so as long as he holds onto that crowbar, he'll have his superhuman strength, which of course makes him somewhat of a challenge for Iron Man. Now, when it comes to Tony, like I said earlier, the entire world believes that Tony and Iron Man are two separate people. And so when it comes to Iron Man appearing, you have the Wrecker believe that he has to go through Iron Man to hopefully find, well, Tony. Either way, when it comes to the Wrecker, he's actually a challenge for Iron Man, but Iron Man is able to hold his own. Now, when it comes to the Wrecker, he begins to play somewhat dirty. You see, you have the Wrecker throw a plane that Tony and Rhodey used to get to the research center, and he threw the plane at the innocent people who were at the research center. Now, Iron Man was able to grab the plane, but the plane exploded, and of course caused a lot of power failures in Iron Man's suit. And so now he is a sitting duck. And so you have the Wrecker being able to just beat down on Iron Man. Now, when it comes to Rhodey and Curtis, they want to help out Iron Man, except you have Curtis run in a different direction to say that he'll get some help. Now, Rhodey still continues on and tries to get close to Tony to hopefully protect him from the Wrecker. But you have Iron Man saying, no, get out of here. There's no way that you'll be able to help me out against this guy. You will only get yourself killed if you get closer to this battle. Now, when it comes to Curtis, he did leave to go get help. He used a payphone to call up his brother Calvin. Now, when it comes to Calvin, I will talk more about him in a moment, but this is Curtis saying Iron Man needs our help. But Calvin says, hey man, I just took a job and it could be a conflict of interest. And we see that Calvin is talking to the Wizard, and the Wizard is part of the Acts of Vengeance group. Now, getting back over to Iron Man, you had Iron Man being able to turn the crowbar of the Wrecker into magnetic. And so all different kinds of metal begins to be attracted to his actual crowbar, like cars. And all these different cars were able to just crash on top of the Wrecker to take him out. Now, at the end of the battle, where it seems that everything is okay, you then have Curtis arrive. And Curtis tells Iron Man, hey man, listen, I was able to get some help. And matter of fact, the help had just arrived. But you have Calvin appear as the new Chemistro. Now, when it comes to Calvin, he's actually the third Chemistro. There was another one between the two brothers, but he does not truly matter. Now, when it comes to Calvin, just like the Wrecker, he was actually hired by the Acts of Vengeance group to come after Tony Stark. Well, really, there is a difference. You see, when it came to the Wrecker, he was hired by the Kingpin to go after Tony. When it comes to Calvin, he was hired by the Wizard to go after Iron Man. Back to the idea that the whole world does not know that Iron Man and also Tony are the same person. Now, either way, he's here to take down Iron Man. Now, like I said earlier, when it came to Curtis being Chemistro, he had an alchemy gun. The alchemy gun had the ability to transmute matter into other kinds of matter. Now, when it comes to Calvin, he still has the same ability, but he does not use a gun. Instead, he used blasters that were given to him by the Wizard. Now, when it comes to Iron Man, he's still technically a sitting duck, to the point where you have Calvin being able to turn the Iron Man suit into complete lead. Iron Man, Tony Stark, is now trapped inside the Iron Man suit. Now, when it comes to Curtis, he is able to catch the attention of Calvin to ask Calvin, why in the world are you doing this for? Why in the world have you gone back to the life of crime? Now, when it comes to Calvin, he tells his brother that he's tired of being a nobody. It's time for him to be somebody in this world. Now, when it comes to Curtis, he was able to keep Calvin busy long enough to allow Tony Stark to escape. You see, when it came to him turning the Iron Man suit into lead, it was very thin. And so Rhodey was able to come from behind to open up the Iron Man suit to let Tony out. And then the two of them were able to sneak away. And so when you had Calvin turn around and try to blast the Iron Man suit, he comes to find out that Iron Man, Tony Stark, is gone. And so now he realized that his mission is a failure, but he's not going to stop. He will continue to find a way to bring Iron Man back out to finish the job. Now, when it comes to Tony, he does meet up with Curtis later on. Now, when it comes to Tony, he wants to know if Curtis had created any kind of devices that could be used as a way to stop Calvin. And we kind of find out that Curtis had created a range of different kinds of weapons that Iron Man can use that can nullify the effects of the alchemy blasters, which will allow Iron Man to get close enough to hopefully bring down Calvin. Now, while you have the two characters talking to one another, well, that is when you have Iron Man be informed that Calvin is just attacking the city as a way to bring out Iron Man. And so Tony has no choice but to go ahead and suit up and go out there as Iron Man to stop Calvin. And so you have Tony go out there as Iron Man to battle against Calvin. Now, while the two characters are battling against one another, we kind of find out that Tony was able to install at least one of the devices that Curtis had made, some kind of force field around the actual iron suit, so that anytime Calvin tries to use the alchemy blasters on Iron Man, they don't work. He is unable to turn Iron Man to some other kind of matter. Now, when it comes to Calvin, he realized that he could still use the environment around them as a way to defeat Iron Man. And so you have Calvin go out of his way to turn the ground into a pool of water, where of course you have Iron Man fall into that pool of water. And then you have Calvin turn that pool of water into steel, trapping Iron Man underground in a set of steel, a cage of steel. And so now it seems like Iron Man is defeated. Now, Iron Man remembers that after a while, any kinds of items that are being transmuted by the alchemy gun or the alchemy blasters will turn into dust, but it could last for a whole hour. You have Iron Man realize that if he's able to find a way to speed up the process, he should be able to break out faster than usual. Now, you do have Curtis try his best to stop his brother, but you have Calvin destroy the gun that Curtis brought, but also you have Calvin destroy the foot that Curtis made that allowed him to walk again after losing his original foot. Now, the story does get wrapped up very quickly because you do have Iron Man being able to escape and then being able to easily take down Calvin. And once the day is done, you have our heroes go their separate ways. And so really that wraps up Acts of Vengeance for Iron Man for today's video. But with that being said, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.